Hello, is this on? It is. Next slide, Ryder. Thank you. First up on the agenda tonight is for some quick introductions by both of our teams, as well as, Nelson just reminded me, as the folks for interpretation said, those of us at the table speaking into the mic, make sure that you are nice and loud, go slow, and state the entire acronym the first time. And thank you, Ryder. So we'll go around and do brief introductions. Then we're going to speak of and agree on norms for the Meet and Confer committee. And then we will elect secretaries. This is a 15-minute section of the agenda. Since I have a mic, I'll go first. My name is Micah Tweetmeyer. I'm a science teacher at Riverside High School and DAE president.
My name is Carlos Perez. I'm a high school social studies teacher at Jordan High School.
Hi, I'm Shemaya Truitt, and I am a middle school teacher at Carrington Middle School.
Hi, I'm Ananda Ghosh. I'm a special education teacher at Giddens Middle School, and I'm the EC rep on Meet and Confer.
I'm Angel Barkstone. I am the cafeteria manager at Hillside and the CNS representative.
My name is Randy Goldston. I'm a custodian at Northern High School.
Good evening. My name is Rita Daniel Ruth. I'm a bus driver at Hillside Transportation.
Good evening, I'm Asia Pope. I am the data manager at Lions Farm Elementary, and I am the classified at large rep.
Good evening, my name is Kelly Mumford. I am an ECIA for Colt 5th grade at Murray Massenburg Elementary, and I am the IM representative on Meet and Confer.
Hello, my name is Nisha Watson. I am a PE teacher at Eastwood Elementary and a proud bus driver and the certified at large rep.
Good evening, Claude Archer, Servant Leadership at Medic Middle School.
Susan Taylor, principal, Jordan High School.
Yeah, we can go back. And I'll start over here so we can keep going. Anthony Lewis, Superintendent, Durham Public Schools.
Nicholas King, Deputy Superintendent for Academic and Leadership Services.
Jeremy Teeter, Chief Finance Officer.
Susan Byerman, Transportation.
Tracy Super Edwards, Director of Community Education.
Good evening, I'm Tyler Steckity, the principal at Moorhead, Montessori.
Okay, good evening, buenas tardes. My name is Nayeli Mogollán. I'm the Coordinator of Interpretation Services at the Multilingual Resource Center. Muy buenas tardes, mi nombre es Nayeli Mogollán y soy la coordinadora de interpretación en el Centro de Recursos Multilingües.
Bernard Sterling, Building Services Custodial Supervisor.
Jesse White, General Maintenance Supervisor.
I'm Tanya Giovanni, Deputy Superintendent for Administrative, Legal, and Compliance Services for the district.
Allison Swain, Riverside High School.
Sonia Lopez, Social Worker, Lakewood Elementary.
Haley Filliger, third grade teacher, EK Poe Elementary.
And we also want to make sure that our materials that we present today are shared publicly to abide and comply with the North Carolina Open Meetings rules. So Dr. Lewis, can we make sure that at the end of this meeting and our presentation, the draft pay scales and the meeting minutes are posted on board docs?
We just had a conversation with our board officers. We just need to determine the appropriate place. So posting, yes, absolutely. We just need to determine the appropriate place, and obviously we'll communicate that with everyone so they'll know exactly where that is.
Thank you. We have all of our materials translated as well. We couldn't fit side-by-side translation on the slides we're going to present, but there are printouts of the slides in Spanish at the back table. And we would like to ensure that both the English and Spanish versions of our materials are shared online.
Yeah, so first of all, good evening, everyone. We just started with it. Good evening. We're excited to be here. This is the first meeting, Confer meeting. So will there be hiccups? Absolutely. But we'll correct those as we go. And so one of the things that we wanted to do was to establish norms in terms of how we will operate. We'll be spending a lot of time together. So it's really important for us to establish norms. We have reached out and hopefully we could, establish a separate meeting to really go deep into the norms and things like that. However, what Mike and I decided on was the DAE team get together and draft some norms. We got together and draft some norms. I sent them to Micah, and she provided this feedback. So this is where we are with our norms. And so just for the group, these norms were developed by both DAE and DPS admin. So I guess what we want to do here is just kind of go through the norms. So just so you know, well, it's at the bottom. Thanks for putting that there. So the red language there is DAE's proposed changes to the DPS proposed norms. So I would like for us to just kind of take a minute, if you haven't already, just to look at those norms and see if these are something that we can agree on to move forward. And just so for accessibility, I'll just read them. One is a shared commitment to focus on solving issues in the district. Maintain a student-driven focus, start on time and end on time, identify desired outcomes at the start of the meeting and deliverables at the end of the meeting. Understand, so the original was accept, and then the proposed language is understand non-closure as resolutions may not be immediate, assume positive intent and own the impact of actions, be respectful, allow constructive friction, listen to understand, be aware of positionality that includes race, gender, and role, exercise equity of voice, so in other words, you stand up, step back, be present and engage, and stay future focused. I will say when we submitted these, we did have maintain a student-driven focus at the very top. So I would propose that we move that to the top. That's also outlined in the policy is that this committee remains focused on student outcomes. So I would entertain any feedback as it relates to, I'm fine with all of these, with the exception of moving the student-driven focus to the top. Open to committee's feedback.
We approve that change and we accept the norms as presented on the screen.
Okay, any other? We good? Look at us making decisions. All right, so if we're clear, we approve and we stand by these norms. So so we'll stand by the norms and we'll get those written. I think we're ready to move to the second part, which will inform who will do the writing. Want to move to the secretary?
Sure. Okay. DAE moves that we nominate Asia Pope as the secretary for DAE's team, and Dr. Lewis, we discussed earlier that it would be appropriate, especially if that person who's designated as secretary is presenting material that evening, that another person on the committee could be designated to be second secretary so that we can alternate roles.
And that's something that's outlined in the policy. So per the policy, we are to elect a secretary. So the conversations that this might have alluded to is that, if someone presenting, could the other person serve as secretary? We nominated, and she has agreed to serve as our secretary, the amazing Susan, at Susan T, because we have Susan B. Susan Taylor, principal of Jordan High, to serve as our secretary. And so we also talked about maybe rotating. So if everyone is okay tonight, open for discussion, if Ms. Taylor can take the minutes tonight at this meeting, and then we'll rotate the next meeting. We're good? We made two decisions, folks. Let's go. All right.
Okay, next slide, please. Today's presentation includes proposals that were developed from 2 years of organizing, thousands of conversations, and platform development sessions at over 2/3 of all work sites. In the past 3 weeks, we have talked to over 2,000 workers and over 40 work sites about the top priorities and the proposals you will hear today and at the future Meet and Confer meetings. Several of these proposals were also brought in a similar space last spring. Our schools, our students, and our workers have never been in more of a crisis. During the first part of today's meeting, we will share our classified pay proposal and questions about the district's classified pay proposal that they presented last week. We will hear from several members of the DAE team and responses from DPS. Next slide.
First, I would like to apologize for having my back to the audience because we did have the room set up a different way, but unfortunately, administration insisted us to have it set up this way. So I'm sorry about that, but classified pay has been a problem in DPS for the past 2 years now. When I moved here from New Jersey, I had over 20 years of public school special education classroom experience and was hired for my experience at first. But after a few months was bumped down and was not compensated for my experience. I lost $600 a month overnight, and I'm sure I am not the only one. That's why this is the first issue we're bringing to our meeting Confer session. Classified workers are operating school buses at 6:30 a.m. They are supporting our EC students with reading and math, assisting some of our most vulnerable and aggressive students, serving students fresh meals that many families rely on, and they are keeping our buildings clean and safe for students. Because classified workers don't make a living wage in Durham's public schools, they are forced to work second and third jobs to make ends meet. If you are classified staff and have to work more than one job like myself, please raise your hand. I'm sure there are many more, but they are probably at their second job tonight. According to the MIT and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the living wage for a single adult without kids in Durham is $25.55 an hour. According to the 2024-2025 pay scale, a bus driver in Durham Public Schools would have to work 23 years until they reach $25 an hour. And the bus monitor, even after 30 years in DPS, will never make $25 an hour. If we want quality, consistent, and experienced classified staff, Durham Public Schools has to be part of raising economic standards for them. DPS did a classified study proposal. They presented 3 different models. One of the 3 models, the MIT models, had some things we want to highlight. These are good steps forward. It raised the minimum wage to $25.55 an hour. It eliminated the need for hold harmless. However, none of the 3 DPS models address a key issue, compression, also known as rewarding years of service. For example, in the MIT model, the DPS proposed a starting salary for an IA doing the job I do is $26.59 an hour. After working 30 years, the max I can make is $30.88 an hour. That's an increase of only $4.29 after 30 years of service. That's ridiculous. Also, there are some salary grades, misalignments. We will get into more detail on all of those things in the following slides.
As the mic is going to go, to provide context, some of the things that Meeting Confer addresses is salary schedules and anything that's directed by the board. The board directed us to have conversations about the classified salary schedule. And so Mr. Teeter presented to the board on October 7th, and the information that we received from DAE and what was shared is DAE's response to that.
I am a cafeteria manager. This is my 29th year working at DPS as a classified employee. It is crucial that 3 entities in Durham County align their values and agree on a living wage. It doesn't make sense for DPS to use a living wage model from Durham County or Durham City if they're going to update it in this fiscal year. In the past, we have heard that the benefits of working in DPS outweigh working for the county or the city, which is justifiably lower wages for DPS. Chair Umstead asked about the board during the board meeting last week, and the question remains, is that a true statement?
Dr. Lewis and Mr. Teeter recently spoke to the county manager. Are there any signals they plan to update the county living wage model this year? What is the appetite to align our minimum living wage with the county's minimum living wage? We are happy to see your proposed salary schedule using the MIT model, starting all staff at $25.55. Are you committed to starting all classified staff at a minimum wage of $25.55 an hour?
Do you guys want to answer the question?
Okay, thank you. So very, very great questions, and I think providing some context for where we are as a staff. And so I think I joined Durham as the CFO about a month after a lot of debris was really settling with the last sort of classified pay effort. And I think it's no secret we had a lot of financial challenges we've been working through and have been focusing on, and we are, I think, equally grateful to be at this same point that we're now able to take another look at this and evaluate what our options are. And so we, as noted, right, we prepared three different possibilities for the starting wages, and I think I would say we echo, right, the need for collaboration and the ability to make that as palatable as a starting wage as possible. We are still very much doing work on these schedules, right? So you'll know if you watched the meeting on October 7th, we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the schedules per se, but right, spent a lot of time talking about process. We spent time talking about alignment of positions and things of that nature. And we shared with the board that the finance team is still going to be doing a lot of work over the next couple of presentations, right, to really fine tune some model schedules. And so I have seen your full presentation sort of ahead of this evening, and I'm grateful for the time that you spent examining the initial drafts of those schedules, and we look forward to you seeing sort of other iterations of the schedules over the next couple of meetings as we continue to work on that. We've got a really sort of big task on our plate of taking these schedules and bumping those up against our existing staff and attaching a cost to that so that we can have something formulated for our next budget request to the county. So there's going to be a lot of information forthcoming, and we'll hope that you'll continue to watch what we present as we continue to fine tune that. It's very serious work, and we made a commitment to do it in-house this time, and so we appreciate you working with us through that.
Good evening. May I have the slide on higher step differential to mitigate compression, please? Thank you. I want to explain first what compression is. It's when your beginning salary is only a few dollars less than your top salary. And that's a big problem with classified pay and DPS. The starting pay has moved, but the ending pay hasn't. People got a raise to address their years. Then it was taken away. We need our years valued. We analyzed the salary steps in all three of DPS's proposed schedules. Here, we see most employees will only be able to expect a 0.5%, that is 0.5% raise with each additional year or step. What this results in is compression. For most of our classified Step 30 employees, they will only be making 16% more than a step 0 employee. Next slide, please. So, as you can see in this slide, in the classified pay schedules, DPS is proposing there's only 16% increase from new hire to a veteran with 30 years of experience. That means you could be working for 30 years and your pay per hour will only be a few dollars more per hour than the starting employee that you more than likely have to train. The employees this affects most are veterans like me. This is my 39th year for DPS. Our proposal addresses compression and ensures that if you put your time in with the district, you can expect to see your pay go up each year to recognize the experience. This is one way we can retain our experienced drivers and other classified staff. Veteran employees offer experience, something new employees don't have yet. Yes, we need to recruit new employees, but I'm already here. In my case, I can help the kids have a better experience than a new person might because they have to figure out how to do it. Like how to make a kid feel comfortable but still follow the rules on my bus. You don't learn that overnight. I've driven for all 3 lots and not by choice, out of necessity. So, with that in mind, will you commit to a 3-year plan starting with the 2025-2026 that implements a 2% minimum local salary differential between each step and ensure all classified workers will move up a step each year?
Yeah, before Mr. Teeter responds, I want to be clear, and that was one of our norms. We probably should have done that at the beginning, identify the desired outcomes at the start of the meeting. As I mentioned, we were tasked with bringing these salary schedules to meeting Confer to get some feedback to take back to the board. And you've done a great job of outlining some of that feedback in the presentation. And so as far as commitments, you're not going to get commitments here. What you're going to get is a dialogue around what does DAE feel we need to take back to the board so the board can make the final decision. So absolutely, we're going to look at this, and a goal is to leave this meeting so that we have information that we can take back to the board as they have tasked us to let's take these schedules to meeting Confer to get some feedback so that they can make a decision given the number of competing values that they have to consider. So I just want to be clear on that front, but I do want Jeremy to be able to respond to that.
So I think two pieces I think that are very important, right? I do not disagree with what you said, right? I think experience is very valuable, and we certainly, just in my department that is lush with classified staff, I lean on those experienced employees, right, to support the work that we're doing in finance. And we will certainly, as I mentioned earlier, we intend to draft additional models for folks to review, and we will certainly cost out a model that reflects what DAE is looking at, and the decision makers will make the decisions that we can with the resources that we have. But we can certainly include that model as something that we look at and that we cost out to see how it will work. And I think another important thing that's really critical to lift up too is that there are some other folks who are not in this room who have some responsibility in this conversation, and they have been absent in that conversation, and that is our state government, right? And so we very much on an annual basis depend upon our state government to make investment in compensation for employees, and that has not been great. And so they've been very silent on that this fiscal year in Raleigh. And so there are a healthy number of classified employees that are state funded, right? And we depend on the state dollars to follow raises as they happen. And so, so we certainly recognize that and just want to lift up that we're really trying to do a lot with local resources in order to make this happen without state involvement in doing things to support that pay. But certainly recognize what you're lifting up, and we'll work to reflect that model and put a cost to it and have conversation around it.
Okay, well, we're all waiting on the state. First, do you agree that this is a priority, paying classified staff better? If so, then how can we affect this on our level? Address funds that are being allocated to central office that could be going to those working directly with students. Advocate with one voice for the county for funding. Advocate to the General Assembly and work towards a pro-public school majority. Speak with one voice to demand Duke pay its fair share of taxes here in Durham, 50 million of which would go to DPS. And remember, we need changes now. We can't wait 3 years.
So I think first, right, it's very clear, right, the fact, that we've made that commitment to do this work in-house. We're not pulling in another contractor. We're not spending money on an additional contractor to do this classified work. It's very important to us. And, and I made a commitment to the board in my role that we would look at this and look at it quickly. And throughout the whole spring, right, we let them know we're going to bring you a timeline. We're going to bring you next steps of what we'll do as a staff. And we delivered on that immediately in terms of getting them the calendar and talking about a plan in a public way. So I can definitely affirm, that the classified pay is a priority for the administration, and it affects all of us, and more importantly, it does affect our children. So we can absolutely agree on that. We appreciate the work that you're doing to advocate the state government to take action in tandem with what we're trying to do here locally, and we support that. And so I can't disagree with things that you said, right? And so we've got a responsibility to find a way to do this in a way that we don't look like Winston-Salem and make those headlines, right? And so we're committed to doing this the right way and doing it the responsible way, and absolutely understand the urgency with what you're looking for.
And let me also just go on record by saying that that is a priority for us. As you often hear me say, we want to be the premier school district. We cannot be the premier school district. We don't have premier salary schedules. And so I don't think you'll find anyone around this table that disagrees that we want to pay our classified staff more. What Jeremy said, we want to do it responsibly. And so this is an opportunity for us to kind of hear, what are the needs? What are the suggestions? What are the priorities? What's the feedback from the DAE? And so when we think about just the hourly rate, I would surmise that DAE's proposal is to no fewer than $25 an hour. Is that correct? So that's the type of feedback that we can take back to the board as they make decisions with competing values.
Okay. I'm going to discuss consistency in the hiring process. That will be slide 6. Hello, everyone. My name is Asia Pope. I've proudly served DPS for 18 years. As a classified employee, first started out as an after-school group leader, became an assistant manager for after-school programs. While working there, worked in the cafeteria, later transitioned into an instructional assistant, and now I serve as a data manager. Over the years, I've seen how hard classified staff work across the district. And I've also seen how inconsistently we're treated when it comes down to pay and placement on a salary schedule. It's time for DPS to address the classified pay, starting with the fairness and consistency in how new staff are onboarded. Currently, there are clear inconsistencies in how years of experience is recognized, how they're recognized. Depending on who completes your onboarding, some staff have prior experience counted while others don't. That's not acceptable.
The same standard should evaluate everyone, and relevant experience should be counted, whether it's from the public or private sector. Our proposal is simple. DPS must ensure consistency and transparency in the hiring process. New hires should know exactly where they fall on the salary schedule and why. DPS should award one step for every verified year of comparable work experience, no matter where that experience took place. Longevity, job duties, and relevant experience should all be taken into account when determining pay. This is about equity, it's about valuing work we do, and the experience we bring with fairness across the board. So, our question is, does DPS have or currently follow a written procedure or policy that describes how people are placed on a salary schedule?
I will respond to that. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Yes.
So, where's it listed? Like, is it, like, where's it listed?
It is in the board docs, the board policies. The board recently adopted the salary administration policy, and that is the board policy.
Sorry, wrong person. I was just trying to talk about that.
But there's also a salary review group that the policy indicated was to be formed, and we are in the process of doing that. So, but there really is, as I indicated, there is a policy that pertains to salary administration.
I think, well, it's good to know that there's a policy, but I also can see that.
I understand what you just said.
I said it's good to know that there is a policy, but it's also very clear that everyone or how they're onboarded is not, it's not the same across the board depending on who's being hired. We have IAs that have 19 years experience and are being paid $1,000 more than one that just came in. I mean, I don't see the consistency in that, and that's why I'm saying, depending on who's doing that onboarding, that may be a problem.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a good question. I'm curious as to a couple of questions. One is, these seem like anecdotal statements about compensation. I'm wondering, where are you getting the information about how folks are being paid and who is onboarding them in order to kind of make the assertion that folks are being onboarded differently based on who is doing that process?
I don't believe that they are all the same, because if there's an IA who has 19 years experience compared to our IA that within that other IA's 19 years experience, that one was in elementary school, can't possibly have the same experience.
I guess my question is, who are we comparing? One IA or an IA who might have 19 years experience. Experience at what?
In DPS.
Experience in what setting?
In DPS
and so again, my question is, where are you, and I'm just curious, where are you gathering the data that you are using to assert that those two folks are making different salaries?
Well, you can look up anybody's salary.
But their salary, the place you look up their salary does not include a resume, right? So you don't know the IA that is making one salary versus another IA. You don't, how do you know what the differences are in their particular qualifications? And here's why I'm asking that question.
Yeah.
What I'm really curious to understand is, from your perspective, what are the factors from DAE's perspective? What are the factors that we should consider when determining how to place a new employee on the continuum? Should we value experience in one setting versus another? Should we value experience in the private sector more than we value experience in Durham Public Schools, or should it be the other way around? Should we consider all experience? Help me understand, and I'm really curious to understand from you all's perspective, how we ought to make those decisions, how we should make that determination as to how we place a person on that particular salary schedule.
Well, definitely with their resume and the experience that they're bringing. What I'm saying is, when I have IAs that are coming up to me and saying, hey, this is an issue for me, can you bring this up? That's what I bring to the table here.
I understand that, but again, that's a broad question for any of you all to share. I'm trying to hear from you, and not just you, again, any of you, suggestions about what we should consider, right? How might we weigh those things that we consider, right? I mean, because I think this is where the work really can happen, right? If you have ideas about how we do that, I think we're certainly open to hearing those ideas. But frankly, you have to tell us a little bit more than you just want everybody to be on board at the same. What exactly does that mean from your perspective is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, one thing that would help us in this discussion is knowing what the policy number is that shows how experience either in DPS or private sector is awarded.
Yeah, so as I indicated, the policy number is the salary administration policy that sets forth the standards regarding how salaries are done. How HR, when a new person is hired, how HR processes that is, as you would imagine, I think to Dr. King's point, is that you look at resumes, you look at the job description or the task that that person is supposed to be doing in their experience, and then you place them into that position with the appropriate salary.
That's policy 7501. And there's a line in there that says fair placement, that all employees will be placed on the appropriate salary schedule based on their job description, experience, and qualifications.
Thank you for sharing the policy number. And you said there's also a group working on how to place folks on the grades?
Yes, that was one of the directives of the board in that policy. And I actually have been working with the HR team over the last few weeks and setting up a plan to get that group formed so that when, not for placement, right? That's gonna be something that an HR expert would have to do. But when you're looking at people that have an issue or a concern regarding their salary, or they feel that their job description and the salary that they're receiving is not quote unquote appropriate for that work, then the salary team, in the past it has been just the HR assistant superintendent that would look at that. But in the policy that was drafted, it was determined that it would make more sense to have a group of people that would listen across the entire district and be able to make those assessments on whether or not the salary was appropriate and on scale with what the work was that was being done.
And you've determined who that group of people is that will be making those assessments of new hires?
It is going to cabinet in 2 weeks for discussion.
So that will be an additional policy to the 7501, 7502?
It will not be a policy.
It will be procedure?
No, it will not be a procedure. It will be a working group, a salary review committee pursuant to the board policy.
And I'm assuming they'll have guiding principles on how to place staff.
I would assume that is what the committee will do. I think it's going to determine on what that working group or committee determines is the most appropriate. I don't know the best practices for salary review, and so I would wait and see what that working group determines.
Would this be something that DPS administration would be willing to bring back to meet and confer that process?
And I think Dr. King raised a great point. I think this can be the beauty of meeting Confer is we as administration can sit and say, anyone that comes in this district that has 10 years of experience as an IA get placed here. However, we're interested in hearing feedback because you all are, you have some members on your team that are IAs that can help inform that decision. So for example, the example I just used, if someone's coming 10 years as an IA from Duke School versus someone 10 years as an IA from EC Classroom at Lowe's Road, totally different environment. So where should they be placed based on that? So we're really interested in hearing what would be some feedback and suggestions as it relates to what this policy says, fair placement based on experience. Experience in one environment, as you know, is totally different in another environment. So absolutely, that's the beauty of being confirmed.
Thank you. No caps in salary. Everybody say no caps. No caps. No caps. No caps. It's critical that all supporters of public education, I know everybody in the room is supporters, continue to push the state to raise the caps. Everybody say no caps one more time. But in the meantime, there needs to be local investment to ensure that all scales are not compressed. These are artificial maxes from the state. These are artificial maxes from the state. It's great the state is raising the floor, but they're not raising the ceiling. For bus drivers in particular, five-year difference in 0 and 30 years. New people are coming in making more pay, and that's great. We celebrate that. But the problem is folks who have lots of years of experience, like my friend down here, Rita, are only making a couple of dollars more, or below, excuse me, a couple of dollars below. We want our years of experience to be respected and compensated. The only person more valuable than a new person we bring in to the district is an experienced staff member that we can retain. Everybody say retain. Retain. The state does not set classified scales. They set a minimum and a maximum. There's no law that says there needs to be a local investment in classified staff. Question: will you support our proposal and no longer use the artificial state maxes when developing classified pay schedules so that the compression can be finally fixed?
Okay, they turned me off again. All right. So the short answer is it's something we sort of do already, but certainly there's a commitment to continue to push in that direction. I think our bus driver scale is a good example of that. I think for a number of years, we've had a higher maximum for bus drivers than the state allows. And then that does require us to invest local money in order to make that differential happen for folks that are at the higher end of that scale. And that's something we've seen happen across the state of North Carolina as we have all fought to try to have enough bus drivers. But again, to sort of answer your question, I agree. We really cannot depend upon those state mins and maxes to make good choices for our staff. And interestingly, right, we talked a lot tonight about the MIT model. And one of our board members introduced me to that model a few weeks ago, and I spent a lot of time working with that tool and applying that, right? So we know the state of North Carolina has that minimum wage of 15 for state employees. And so I looked at that tool with some of our most economically depressed counties in North Carolina, just for curiosity, right? And I couldn't find a single county in North Carolina where $15 an hour was a living wage, right? And so I think, so certainly recognize the tremendous disconnect from what the state has constructed as recommended scales for classified employees. And we do have a lot of pressure locally throughout the state to figure that out. And Durham is not alone in certainly trying to solve this problem. And certainly when the state came along, it's been 4 or 5 years now, right? They initially lifted the minimum wage to 13 an hour, and then the year after that, we saw the 15 come into play. And then we really saw the compression become even more of an issue at that time. And so just due to the financial challenges, right, a lot of districts were forced to bring in that new minimum wage, and they didn't adjust everything after that, right? So we saw a lot of folks kind of smushed together when that happened, and some districts have gotten into a lot of financial trouble trying to fix it. And, but certainly we are committed to having sort of the best scales that we possibly can, and certainly within our means, and we're going to advocate the best that we can. And we can't make promises that it'll be perfect, but we can certainly promise that we're going to work towards making it better and trying to get it more into the direction that you're looking for.
I'd like to ask another clarifying question, if I might. In looking at your proposal, there looks like there are really kind of two prongs. I want to make sure, is it two prongs or is it really just one? I see that the first, what I'm categorizing as a prong, I should say, is not using the state's maximum as an upper ceiling. Would you all be open to, based on our budgetary constraints, there being a local maximum on administrative staff compensation? That might be based on, the appropriate steps to address compression, based on, for instance, the MIT scale, if you will.
Just to clarify, Dr. King, you said a local maximum on administrative staff?
I should say non-administrative.
Okay, that's what.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, is the issue caps, period, or is the issue just the state's cap?
Both, because oftentimes DPS's classified pay is spoken about with the state suggested max as a thing, a concern and a consideration. And without like a local maximum, which would be great, that would address compression, right? Even if you raise the minimum to 25.55, if you still have the state max, right, that's going to continue the issue of compression, because you're gonna have to fit 30 years into even a smaller space now. So the two ways to address compression are local pay increases for each step for all classified staff and raising the ceiling.
Yeah, but I guess the nuance that I would argue is, if we do away with the state's maximum, I mean, if you have a starting point, right, it's $25 an hour, and you argue for a 2% increase for each step, right? So 2% plus 25, a 2% increase of $25 an hour each year. I mean, don't you have a cap just based on math?
Yeah, there's definitely a cap based on math.
And if we're saying that we're not going to use the state's max, right, as the max, and we are, and I want to be clear, I'm just a deputy, I don't have the ability to commit to this. If we are saying that we're going to have a scale that starts at 25%, $25 an hour, and adds 2% each year as a step, right? That's a max. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is you can't logically have both those things be true, right? You're gonna have a max because you have a max, and whoever the most experienced, we're saying we're throwing the state max out, right? The highest, and for this, I guess for this scenario or hypothetical, I'm suggesting that we would do that. What I'm suggesting is, if we do that, and say in a world, a perfect world, Micah starts tomorrow at $25 an hour, right? As a non-administrative classified employee. 39 years from now, Micah is now the highest, the most experienced non-classified, non-administrative staff member in Durham Public Schools. Her salary is $25 an hour plus 2% every year for those 39 years, right? Right? that's a max. Right, but it's based on her experience. So wouldn't your proposal simply be that DPS not use the state max, right?
That's what our proposal states.
No caps on salary.
No state caps.
I'm suggesting you don't need the last clause. I'm suggesting your request would end where you have your semicolon.
Local boards do have the authority to exceed the cap. Thank you. Yes, sir. Bi-weekly pay. We propose that DPS move all classified to bi-weekly pay. Currently, most are paid monthly and some are paid bi-monthly. This is a financial strain on workers and it is inconsistent. It should be consistent. What's the difference? You say, it's a cash flow problem for some people. It's an issue because in a 5-week month, people will be getting paid every 3 weeks. This issue comes up in conversation with workers all over the district. Managers could more easily hire staff if they are paid more regularly. It would help with recruitment as well as retention. Currently, some of our staff are paid bi-monthly, but most are paid once a month. Cafeteria managers could hire folks more easily, and this will help with recruitment and retention as well. In order to speak to equity, it's a financial strain and it's also inconsistent again. So our question to you, Dr. Lewis, will you commit to providing bi-weekly pay to all classified workers?
Okay, so I have, prior to Durham, I have worked in a district that did pay classified staff in that way. So it can be done. However, I think we would have to balance some things with that. So one, right, just with the understanding that in that situation, your payroll staff, who are also classified staff, as soon as they pick their head up from finishing the first payroll, they're diving right back into another one, right? And so there's not a lot of time in between for them to do the other items that they have to do in between payrolls, right? And so, in order to make that successful, okay, it's not a red thing, right? And so in order for that to be successful, right, we would need to provide support to that payroll team that makes it happen, right? And so we have, right, so we know, right, we've got criticism for the number of folks that we have in central office. So we would need to make sure that folks are not going to be critical, right, if we see growth in the payroll department in order to make that happen, in order to facilitate that, right? So I think we would just want to make sure we had that kind of understanding if we were to make that kind of change in order to deliver in that way. So, so for me as the finance officer, I've done it before. There are other districts who do it, and it's not a hard no, but it's sort of a softer conversation of we would need to make some changes to the way our payroll team is structured in order to make sure that we don't have mistakes and that things are done timely and that we don't burn out that payroll staff. So we would just ask for some patience from you all and some grace from you all as we evaluated what it would take to reconfigure payroll to deliver that sort of payroll model, because it does take a lot from the payroll team to do it. So.
Oddly enough, I worked in the same district that Mr. Teeter is speaking of, and what I can tell you is that is a tiny district, it was a gauntlet for that team. One thing I might suggest, and I don't know if this group would be interested in, is maybe, conferring with your colleagues in accounting, particularly your classified colleagues in accounting that have this as their configuration. Again, and I want to be clear, I'm not against this proposal at all, but I have seen what it means for folks who work in payroll, and when you have that configuration in a school system with less than 500 employees, right? In this school system, in terms of the size of this school system, that would be a monumental undertaking. And I would just hope that you all would, at a minimum, maybe confer with your colleagues in a county that does that, so that you're, fully aware of what that ask will be for your colleagues at the central office and the payroll department.
Yeah, and I'll just add, as Dr. King said, I don't think anyone disagrees with the proposal, but again, thinking about the how. And that was one of those instances I was mentioning a moment ago, those competing values. Yes, we want to look at, raising the classified salary base pay to close to $25 an hour. And we don't want to, we have to also weigh that against, do we hire additional payroll technicians to get that done? So those are the competing values. Also considering, as of today, we don't have an approved budget yet from the state. And as I was talking to some delegates from our delegate assembly, we don't know when that may happen. So as of right now, it will just require additional, time and research.
I think, yes, it would be an adjustment, a short adjustment. But once it's established, I think it'll run automatically. Also, we shouldn't have to hire an additional staff. It shouldn't cost us more, rather, because each department has its own payroll tax.
I have a question. As a building principal, people, when I look for classified staff, they ask, can I get paid every 2 weeks? And I say no. I didn't think it was possible. But I'm just curious, I don't know anything about payroll. I don't know how it works. But how much does it cost just to run payroll? And like with that in mind, if you're gonna run it twice, how much does that increase our cost?
So I think, right, there are a couple of costs that come with running payroll, right? Obviously, it's the people to do it, right? And so we have a centralized payroll function, right, in the Fuller building. So it's a department of 9 folks, right? So 7 of those are payroll techs. 1 is a supervisor who, even though she's a supervisor, still is processing payroll for people, which is different than some of our larger sister districts where the supervisor doesn't touch any payroll. And then we've got a deduction specialist, right, that's handling the benefit deductions. And so you also have the software cost. And so so what we know is it would not cost us additional in the software space. The software we have can accommodate it, and the software we're moving to can also accommodate it. But in the personnel cost, right, you're pressing upper 6 figures, right, in order for us to make that happen. I haven't done the math here in front of me, but right, pushing close to $1 million, right, in order for us to make payroll happen. And then the cost would grow just from that conversation of the people, the additional people we would need in order to make that turnaround happen and take care of the things that happen in between payrolls. Right, and I think just in terms of, so the payroll process definitely is a team effort district-wide. Sorry about the feedback. And so, so at every school, right, you have a school treasurer that's working with you to help you keep up with your time, make sure your time's accounted for, your leave is accounted for, right, and they're critical partners in the work that goes on in payroll. And so they're providing us information that we need to process it. But at the end of the day, you've got that team of 7 technicians that make sure over 5,000 people get paid every month. And so it's pretty nimble considering where we are and the antiquated technology that we're using to do it. But
I'm also interested in terms of you all's interaction at the schools around this issue. I think you talked about the number of folks that you spoke to in developing these proposals. I'm wondering if you all have had any conversation with school data managers, not data managers, I'm sorry, school treasurers, in terms of what this would mean for their particular workload. Because the reality is, as you think about, so they are on the front end of the payroll process, right? And so this would necessarily double their workload, right off the bat. And so I'm curious as to whether or not you all have had that kind of conversation and what the feedback was that you received relative to that, from that perspective, if that's been a question that you asked.
We haven't posed that specifically to treasurers. I think part of this, it's helpful to understand that that would be an extra burden on school treasurers. I think one thing that we think about is just because it's a challenge or it might be hard doesn't mean it shouldn't be done for our workers. And if folks who make the least amount of money in this district, if it would help them to pay them every other week so that they can survive in this economy, that's what we should do for them. And we should figure out a way to have more HR technicians. I'm not sure the critique of being heavy downtown is HR technicians. We all know every payday we check those paychecks and we call you if they're not right. And I think we would all advocate for more payroll technicians to make sure everything runs really smoothly. But it's about finding a way, like us in our schools, when we have those 10 extra students and we just have to find a way to make it happen because we can't put those kids anywhere else. We gotta make it work for the folks who aren't even making $25 an hour.
Just want to be clear, nobody has taken any position against this as a proposal. I'm asking a practical question about whether or not that has been considered, because, frankly, while we do find ourselves in a place where we have to make things happen all the time as it relates to the work, we also have to be realistic about what we ask of folk, right? And I'm asking, my question is simply, have you considered that as an issue? And have you had that conversation with those folks? Because I think that's only fair, that their perspective about this be considered.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on to proposed grade differentials. DPS has different pay scales for different positions. DPS calls that grades. For example, as an ECIA, I'm on a different pay grade than a general DAE. The issue with the proposed grade differential is that we don't understand how the district lands on different scales for different positions. Higher paid employees would also receive larger percent raises with each step under all three of these proposals from Mr. Teeter. Why is the grade differential higher for administrative positions compared to all other workers like those of us here tonight who work with students?
Okay, thank you for your questions around that. And so, sort of like I said earlier, these are very rough drafts, right? And so we have additional proposals that we're going to bring forward for folks to look at. And I think in some of these, right, and what you're looking at, there are still some ghosts of the previous schedules, right, that are evident there. And so the additional proposals that you'll see come forward will look different. And we look forward to your reactions to those as we get those in front of you. I think one of the items that I wanted to look at, right, is this first one with that notion, the NC2 to NC5, for example. I think it's critical to lift up that in the existing Durham model, as well as in that state model, there is no improvement across those. They treated the bottom floor the same for all of those. And that has presented a challenge for school systems ever since the $15 minimum wage started with the state. And so that's an area certainly that we're looking at, and that we know it requires some sort of attention because the current is nothing. There's no incentive to be an NC1 versus an NC3 in the current structure of the Durham schedules and in the state schedule. So in sort of past salary study work, that's a space where we did
we normally try to embed some sort of difference, right, to try to start to break up that differential. And so I would say what you can expect, right, in some of the other models, and I told Dr. Lewis that he will get to a point where he says uncle, right, with the number of different iterations that we're gonna bring forward for people to react to and provide feedback to. And so we will, one of the models that we'll bring forward, right, is one where you see a consistent percentage across those grades, right, as you work between the different salary grades. So I would just say stay tuned on that one, and you'll see some other material to react to. An important one, and I see Ms. Clem in the room, right, is those M's, right? So that's where we sort of have our health professionals in the district, right? And we don't really look to necessarily marry those health professional schedules to the others, right? And so they're treated a little bit differently. And we did spend some time in this process thinking sort of very heavily about our OTs and our PTs and folks of that nature and what were other districts doing for them. And a lot of what we saw, right, is working to make them mirror the certified health professionals like speech therapists, for example, and they work to really bring OTs and PTs in lines with those. So that was a really very special category that we had to look at with a different lens in order to take care of our health professionals in that model. So just maybe wanted to kind of drive it down, and we don't necessarily look for a marriage between those health-based scales and some of the other scales. And so we certainly, again, appreciate these questions, and we know we're going to have other models for you to react to that look a little more uniform in nature as we continue to weed out some of those existing differentials in the current model that doesn't necessarily make sense.
Can you change the slide, please? Here, if you notice the chart from DPS MIT model, instructional assistants will start off making more than an OT assistant. But in the other two models, they start off making less, which is it supposed to be? And if they're going to make these scales differently, how can you ensure that they still fit with the rest of the scales? OT assistants do the same job as an OT, but they cannot do evaluations. They are technically supervised by an OT who work under their license. They require an associate's degree after completion of 2 years of an OTA program. Both are underpaid. One requires more education and a degree. Compensation should be aligned with the job demands. How can the district ensure that there are appropriate pay differentials between these grades and the NC01 and the NC19?
So thank you for that. And so certainly, as we bring forward the other models for folks to consider, that's something that we'll be sure that we address. And so I think this is a byproduct of those health scales not necessarily being married to the other classified scales in the relationship. And so that's certainly something that you'll see look differently as we bring forward the other models for folks to react to in the process. And I think, again, to that second question, right, just sort of the same thing I said earlier, those are the models. We'll give some different scenarios for folks to react to as we concentrate on that work. We really did just sort of, we were really at the infancy stage of the whole process, and it was important for us for folks to see it play out every step of the way in a public way versus us having a final product. Here it is. And so we're looking forward to you following us through in the next steps as you see those other iterations of the schedules come forward that address some of the things that you're interested in.
And I think, as Jerry mentioned, this is a good opportunity for us to just kind of show our hands along the way. And I hope you are seeing evidence of what we heard when we first came here. We need more transparency around our budget. That's one of DAE's proposals as well, transparency around budget. And as we are rolling this out, we're showing you everything, and then using this process as we Confer process to actually get this feedback that we can take back and fine tune. So definitely appreciate y'all being a part of this on the front end.
I have a clarifying question, and I'm sorry.
Can you speak a little bit more about what you mean by that this proposed salary schedule does not fit with the rest of the proposed living wage models?
We are getting pretty close to time, so I want to be cognizant of that. We did also share all of our classified pay schedules with the team, so I hope that you can get a chance to look at those too, Dr. King. But what we weren't clear on here is why someone who is, it's required that they have more education is starting off at a lower hourly wage than someone whose job does not require that same level of education. We just wanted to know more about how these were constructed. And going back to it being paid for experience and education, how will folks be placed on these grades?
I guess so your question is, your issue isn't really that this particular schedule doesn't fit with the rest of the models, is that you don't understand why there would be comparable salary for these two positions.
Generally, as you go up in the classified scales, the starting salary is more. And I think Mr. Teeter is going to say something, maybe.
Okay, sir. Yeah, I think just again, I don't disagree, right? And I think this is an example of one of the areas that we're going to tighten up in the process as we push towards sort of a model schedule.
Thank you.
May I have the slide on administrative positions and raises, please? First of all, let me start by saying, when we are talking about administrative positions and roles, we are not addressing certified student-facing principals and assistant principals. On DPS's proposed new scales, certain classified administrative positions would earn considerably more than our neighbors that are administrators in Wake County and in Chapel Hill County schools. The questions that we would like to ask are, one, what exact positions are going to be classified as admin 1 through admin 6? And secondly, why are you proposing, with the little money we have that will help our students, that we should prioritize schedules for administration that are much larger than our friends in Wake or Chapel Hill for the same job?
Thank you. So I anticipated these questions. And so first, administration is not a priority in the work that we're doing here, right? And so we recognize when we go through classified salary schedule, oftentimes districts have to prioritize, consider the cost and prioritize what do you do first, what do you do second, what do you do third, right? Where do you have sort of the greatest issues that you need to address, right? And so we're going into this project very much so with the understanding that raising our minimum wage to a living wage is the #1 priority for us as we do this. So I just wanted to make that commitment to you as the finance officer, that we recognize that that's the #1 priority, is getting that minimum wage to a living wage for Durham as quickly and as reasonably as we can. So that's unemphatically the #1 priority, and taking care of our staff. And so it's, we know it would be political suicide for us to do anything for administration without taking care of everyone else and making everyone else a priority, right? We get that. And so I think too, we're being more transparent than these other two entities that you have on the screen, in the sense that these schedules So right, these public facing schedules that they have do not address all of their administrative positions in central services. And so we do have a broader view on the table, right? So the model that you're looking at there, it would stop, for example, with people who would report to me, for example, or directly to me, right? So our senior executive directors or executive directors is sort of where theirs sort of stop in an outward facing way. And so they don't really share their cabinet level salaries in an outward facing way in those units. And so we're really trying to do better, right, in making sure we lift all of that out. Certainly we recognize that what you see there is not going to come to fruition in this project. And it's just taking a look at that angle. I think also in the course of that work, right, we do try to compare ourselves to city government and county government as well. So this conversation is not about me, but right, say we've got positions like finance officer that are highly transferable, right, and can cross multiple units. But again, this is not about me, and we're focusing on you all, right? We know that you're our priority, and this is something that's really not likely to happen. But wanted to, just sort of lift up where things roll, right, as you address sort of the bottom up approach to the schedule, knowing that we'll have to start with our minimum wage.
Jeremy said it's not about him, but I want to say this publicly so everyone can understand, everyone is important in this district, and I hope you all have been pleased with what you've seen from our finance department since Jeremy's arrival. We don't want to go backwards to where we were, and so we have to keep good people here. What Jeremy's not saying publicly is he can literally go across the street with less staff and probably make about $70,000 or $80,000 more. So I want to just highlight that. Yes, we're going to look at our lowest paid workers, and we want to make sure that we are keeping up with our staff here. So I just wanted to lift that up.
So one of the great things about Meet and Confer, as you said earlier, Dr. Lewis, is that you're getting this feedback, right? The board has charged us with bringing feedback for important decisions, such as classified pay proposals. And you said this evening that you can't make commitments to our proposals per se, but I think the commitment is listening to our proposals and listening to the questions that we bring here, and a commitment to considering our feedback, right? We have talked to thousands of workers. We don't just represent DAE, we represent all of the folks that we've been talking to in the buildings and on all the work sites who have been prioritizing what they want us to talk about at this table. So we're not just here to say what we would like and have you say something about how that's nice and we have other proposals to make. This committee is for you all to take what we're saying and build new proposals that take what the 5,000 plus workers would like to see in their classified pay proposals. So I would like to say that we're looking forward to collaborating with how to place staff on grades and in steps. And it sounds like you're open to that collaboration and hearing feedback. But what we would really like to know, if you're committed to developing your next proposals, which it sounds like you're bringing to the board next week, that start at a $25.55 minimum wage, and that you're committed to having no cap on the salaries, as well as committed to 2% or considering 2% step increases so that staff can finally be free from the compression that they've been feeling for years.
Yes, absolutely. That's the purpose of this get together, is to hear feedback. And you put it in writing, so it's easy for us to take it back. And one of the things that I'm hopeful that we can do before we leave is for our secretary to kind of high level read and capture what was said, so we know what we're all taking back to Jeremy to kind of work his magic calculator so we can take those proposals. And again, this is what the board directed us to do, is to get feedback. So, yeah, absolutely. We are committed to taking this feedback, but we're asking clarifying questions so we know exactly what to take back.
And just so we understand, there is still a revised proposal going to the board next week.
Yeah, so so that is still our commitment, and you will see just over the course of the next several board meetings, conversation around this, as we continue to refine models, when we leave, as soon as we leave here, right, I'm taking, your feedback and incorporating that, and we'll look at models that reflect what DAE would like for us to consider, and then from there we'll build it out, and then we're going to immediately sort of jump into the work of costing that out, and so that we can have some conversations about that aspect as well. But absolutely, we're committed to exploring what you'd like us to and lifting that up in a public way.
Yeah, I think the costing out of how many HR technicians it would take to pay classified staff biweekly would be great. What we do know is our neighbors in Wake pay all their classified staff, and it would be good to maybe know how many technicians they have. And also the great thing about Meet and Confer is that this committee is able to bring forth recommendations to the board that isn't just DAE or Mr. Teeter. It's this committee, which is our charge here today. So as we move forward, I think that's an important thing to understand the power of this group and what we can recommend to the board for something like classified pay.
I think if I could make sort of one other sort of point while we're on this, right, and it's something that I've lifted up with the cabinet and as we contemplated the work that we're trying to do for classified employees, right, is that as I went through those models, in particular the MIT model, I immediately looked to see what was the juxtaposition, right, of the classified schedule to our certified folks. And I just think we need to be mindful that as we continue to do that work with classified, we've got to be mindful of our certified folks as well, and how close, right? So we could have some scenarios emerge where entry-level instructional assistants are just a few $1,000s away from an entry-level teacher, for example, in Durham, right? So that's another angle that we're already thinking about and we want to be mindful of and consider as well while we go through this work. So we're really trying to think about all of the implications and just really sort of predict other projects that might arise as a result of this very deserving work.
And just on that point, I don't think we want to get caught in the trap of keeping classified pay at one level because certified folks aren't paid enough either. And just because tonight we're not talking about a certified pay increase, certified folks do receive more often state increases and local increases. Just this school year, we're getting a local supplement increase. And so I don't want us to get in the habit of saying we can't pay classified staff a certain amount because it would be too close to our other underpaid staff.
So thank you for sharing that. I think, right, that's important for me to hear and for us to hear because it is something, right, that we thought about. And so thank you for that. And I think that does help us move forward with a little more confidence and sort of one less thing to be concerned about in the short term.
So I guess I'll just ask again, do we want to recommend these proposals to the board for consideration in developing classified pay schedules as a Meet and Confer committee as our first group proposal?
Again, this is feedback that we will definitely take back. I guess a point I also want to make is as we think about, exactly what you just said around our certified staff, not wanting to make it
the hourly rate for our beginning teachers that close to our beginning rate of our classified staff, whether that's $25 an hour. So yeah, again, we will take this feedback back. And then what you'll see is what I heard earlier is that the way that we can continue to build in our trust is what happens after these meetings. So I'll encourage you to tune into the board meeting. You will see evidence of what we heard tonight.
All right. Good evening, everybody. So we're going to be moving on to protecting immigrant students from ICE and bullying. I think it's clear to everybody in this room that masked ICE agents have been terrorizing and traumatizing communities across the country. We've seen ICE agents here in Durham, and I think we're all committed to ensuring that that trauma and terror is not inflicted on our students and our school district. We have brought all the proposals that we're going to be discussing tonight to the table, to public discussion with the Board of Education in meetings, public meetings that were live streamed in April and May. All but one of the Board of Education were in full support of these proposals. And so while we're going to be revisiting them, we're going to be placing a little bit more emphasis on some of the follow-up questions to get some clarity around implementation, given that there's already broad support and a fair amount of familiarity with these proposals. We also just wanted to highlight that many of these come out of not just the countless conversations that we're having across the district with our coworkers, but also have been raised by concerned parents and community organizations, including Durham for All, School Parents for Immigrant Defense, and Alianza por la Educación. Next slide. So even just a cursory glance at DPS's strategic plan demonstrates that what we're bringing tonight is in full alignment with some of the key aspects of the plan. Clearly, this has to do with equity and ensuring equitable access to the opportunities that our students need to succeed. And this is fully in line, obviously, with the second priority in the district's plan to make sure that we're providing a safe and healthy school environment that supports the whole child. We just wanted to start with the realization that we got a lot of common ground here already in moving forward on these proposals. So next slide. All right, so the first one that, again, we've discussed in public that has broad support from the Board of Education is to make sure that we're providing red cards, know your rights cards for all schools, and that includes not just front office, student services across the board, making sure that those are visible, available to all folks. But before we get into the question here, I just wanted to clarify. So for folks in the audience, if you have seen red cards in any of these places, school buses, front office, student services, the things that are listed there, could you raise your hand? Okay. That is not even a fraction of the school, and I'm not raising my hand because I checked our front office this morning. Same question for any folks here at the table? Okay. This was something that was broadly agreed to for the Board of Education, and so the question is, what is it going to take to make sure that these are available, readily accessible to all staff, all students, to make sure that we're all clear on what our rights are going forward?
Good evening, this is Nayeli. As an immigrant, as a mother of two students enrolled in Durham Public Schools, as a former student at Durham Public Schools, let's have this discussion offline. I really value that we're having this conversation. It's important, it's necessary. My only concern is that broadcasting could intentionally put some of our families at risk or make them feel unsafe. The intention is good, and I want to thank you for bringing this to the table. But once that information is out publicly, we can control how it's used. I acknowledge the frustration. I propose that we form a committee combined of equal parts of administrators and equal parts of DAE to bring forward a recommendation for our next meeting. Let's be strategic.
One of the problems we're trying to solve here tonight, actually, in this meeting, is to solve the issue that immigrant families don't have evidence that the district is doing enough right now to protect our students, and our workers don't have what they need to protect our students if something happens. So as a result, these families are not engaging in sending their kids to school, and we've seen reduced numbers of students coming to our schools. The only way to clearly do this is to say publicly what's being done. We've already said these things publicly before, and whatever policies are passed will be part of the public record. We're not trying to put anybody in harm's way. We're trying to do the opposite. And doing policy making in back rooms privately does not inspire confidence or trust in the greater community that it's safe to send their kids to Durham Public Schools.
Let me just be clear. I will not put any student or any family or this district or this county in jeopardy by having a conversation like this that's being broadcast and recorded. I simply will not do that. What you may not know, because I didn't see anyone in this room other than a few people, is that we've had 2 meetings with immigrant families, listening, sharing what we have in place to keep their students safe. They appreciated that. They gave us feedback for our next session. We will continue to work and communicate with our families to ease that fear. And we heard that fear loud and clear from our families. But what you will not hear in this room is an open discussion on our protocols that we have to keep our students and families safe. We owe it to them, and I think you heard, to protect them from any additional, for us to get in any additional crosshairs with the federal government. So I will not engage in that conversation in this space.
So to be clear, the conversation's already been had. It was had in this exact space. We already had it with Board of Education. All the proposals that you see here in this presentation are readily available, have been discussed, are already have already been live streamed when we had that discussion. The discussion has been had, and people are already at risk. And I think what the administration has demonstrated for the past 10 months is that they don't need additional excuses to go after our people. They're doing it already, right? And I think the more that we start to step away from that conversation, the more ground we see with every step. And I think we owe it to ourselves and to our neighbors and the students that we work with every day. We're also having those conversations around the district. These don't come out of a vacuum. And so while I appreciate the concern for safety and security of our students, it's one that we share, but I think we share a different perspective on how to approach that. We prefer to take a bit more of an assertive approach to make clear to our people that we stand with them and that we stand in solidarity. So
what Michael, I don't know if Michael shared with you, we had this conversation, and what I shared, if the cameras and recording is off, let's talk. But I will not do that. Where something is recorded, it can be viewed again by someone else that has no direct good for this community.
I mean, I have maybe a unique position. I have a family that has a student at my school and a student at our school. I will acknowledge there's a disconnect in the language and what we've said to families and how we're going to protect them. I'm at Moorhead, and there's no way I'm letting an ICE person take me with my kids. Like, I will go to jail before I let that happen. Sure. And that is not in line with what our district policy is, and I don't care, right? Like, good. We've been instructed that they have legal authority, but that's something we have to make a decision on, and I'm making the decision to not let them into my building.
Sure.
And that's not what's being said at other places. And I agree that we need to have a conversation about this, but like Dr. Lewis said, like Connie Yelly said, like, I don't think it's right to have this conversation with cameras on, so people watching this can identify where we can go and how we can address some of the things that we're putting in place to keep our kids safe, so they can work workarounds around it. And I have a question about when we had this conversation last time, like, did we seek family input? Because I've spoken to several families in my school have all said they don't want this conversation broadcast.
I'm sure we could everyone at this table could pull anecdotes across the board to back up what their claims are. I mean, we could go all night doing that back and forth. I already mentioned with these policies, we're not getting into the specifics. We've already discussed the specifics in public, at public meetings, live stream, that's readily available. Anyone in this room can pull out their phone and record this entire conversation, even if we shut the cameras off, right? So I'm not clear on what the concern is. I think what's really concerning is that all we've seen is an email so far. That's what people are concerned about. And I appreciate that those conversations are happening, but if we don't know that they're happening and we don't see the evidence concretely in policy, in red cards at the front desk, in cross-school trainings, right? You're one principal, and I respect and appreciate what you just said. I put my body on the line too, hands down, with no hesitation, okay? So I'm with you on that, but we can't say that about every principal in the district. We can't.
I can't speak for what.
I know, none of us can.
But I think the way to have that conversation is face to face with that person, not in a political sense, or not in a public space.
When would that conversation happen?
I mean, you guys you're in schools all the time. Have it when you go to the school.
My job is not to train principals. My job is to teach kids and protect my kids.
I understand, 100% understand. I just don't think this is appropriate to have a broadcast, and we're gonna agree to disagree.
Yeah. Our job is to train principals, and we have trained principals on the correct protocol for this work. And it is not appropriate for us to share that publicly with anybody so that anybody can know how to support the measures that we put in place. And I think the superintendent has been quite clear. Again, we've done that work. We stand by that work, but we're not going to discuss that in this open forum for this purpose today. I appreciate the perspective that Mr. Steckity brings. That's a decision that he's made as it relates to how he will respond to that. That goes even beyond the directive that we've given him. Certainly respect that, and every principal will have the right to make that determination. But again, we are not going to discuss the measures that we take to protect our students. Just as we don't discuss and tell people how we respond when someone comes to our school and tries to threaten us in any other physical way. It is not wise to put that information out publicly.
We're all here because we want our students to be safe. It's the most important thing, okay? And so I think the point that we're here to make and why we're bringing this issue is because we brought all of these proposals in April and in May. We got commitments from all the board members and from your administration. And we're here again to bring them back because we haven't seen action. And that's what's really needed to protect our students. And so I think the key question here is there's a lot of discrepancy school to school. So there may be a few schools, and I totally get the point, and we don't need to get into specifics, absolutely. But what is clear and what we've seen is that it is very inconsistent school to school. I understand all principals, we understand principals have had a certain communication. We are not seeing the same thing schools to school. Some principals are telling their staff they cannot give out red cards because they haven't gotten guidance. Other principals have them in the office. We need to have the same experience for every kid and parent who walks into a school, whether it's Moorhead, whether it's Jordan, whether it's Watts, right? And so we're bringing it back to y'all for you to understand that more needs to be done
to ensure there's consistent implementation, and that all staff are trained, and that all families know what is the protocol, so that they can feel safe to, come on campus and there's kids at school, all that stuff. Who here has gotten training on what the protocol is? DPS staff?
I have a question. I'm Susan Taylor, principal of Jordan High School. I don't understand the importance of having this live stream. Why is that more important than the conversation? Dr. Lewis clearly said we can have that conversation. The request is for it not to be live streamed. We are here for 2 hours. We're committed to this process. I don't understand why the live stream is more important. And I want to tell the mom, the DPS employee, right now, your opinion matters more than mine. And I value what you say. And I don't think your voice should be lost. We can have the conversation. We want the accountability. I do not understand the commitment to the live stream. It's not a difficult ask. Documents are going to be posted on website. The information is public. Dr. Lewis has clearly said we can have this conversation. We don't have to live stream it. We all want to keep our kids safe. We want our kids to attend school. We don't have to live stream. That's the ask, not to avoid the conversation entirely. And I don't understand why that is more important than the conversation with the group of people who are here.
So part of it has to do with the question of access. Not everyone can make this meeting, be a part of this conversation. We're doing interpretation online to make sure that families who couldn't make it, who are concerned about these questions, can engage with them and see what the district is doing.
I would ask this, if we would stop the live and you get anyone that wants to know about our protocols, have them schedule a meeting with me. I'm more than happy to talk to them.
So, and just so we're clear, okay, everything that's on here has already been live streamed. Everything that's on here has been submitted to the Board of Education. Everything that's on here has been discussed publicly with the Board of Education. We're not talking about having a detailed rundown of any game plans at all. We're just asking because we have a responsibility to follow up on these questions when they've already been discussed publicly, live streamed, readily available for anyone who's interested, okay? It's already been done, so the risk that we're putting in the room is in the past. It's actually already happened. What we're doing, we're not asking to go through a detailed line for line discussion of any of these policies. These are already available to everybody in the room. They're already available. So we're just asking, where are we at on these things? Is really what the baseline question is if we ran through each one. No one is asking for a detailed review of any of the proposals that we're bringing forward. You've already seen them. The board's already seen them. We've already discussed them publicly. What we want to know is what is going to happen with them. That's the only discussion we're interested in having tonight. That's the main one.
I think everybody in this room knows that with this administration, everything changes every day and it's unpredictable. So what we had last year, last semester is different than today. What you may not realize and know is that this district and surrounding districts have been contacted by OCR by some of our stances. Again, I am not going to have the conversation online. I'm more than happy to talk offline about the things we have in place. And I am pleased, let me just say this as superintendent, I'm pleased with our protocols that we have in place. I'm pleased with the feedback we got from our families that will help us further enhance. I'm pleased with our ongoing conversations with our immigrant families. You were not there to see the tears from our families that actually shared their daily lived experiences.
I've seen it.
And so what I'm asking you is to just simply respect our families.
That's why I'm here. I think that's why we're all here. So we'll caucus for a moment.
You just like to take a minute to caucus real quick. All right, thank you. Once again, I want to ground us in the fact that we're all here to protect our students and our coworkers and our community. And we're here revisiting this proposal because we haven't seen the action that is needed that workers feel would protect our students. And we've heard from our community allies that more is needed to be communicated. We are understanding of the concern about that you do not want to answer the questions with the live stream, and we're willing to stop the live stream if we can go through the questions and hear the district's answers to the questions.
I just want to say thank you, Mika. Appreciate that.
All right, back to our regularly scheduled program then. So